and welcome to Creatively Rich. I have Ada Barlatt on with me today. Ada is an amazing strategic analyst. She helps get inside your business and make the systems all flow together and work together. She knows all the things about all the software. She's absolutely brilliant. And you can find her over at operations-ally.com. So Ada, today we are here to talk about cruising while poor. Tell us what that's like.
So I've been a cruiser for many years. I was thinking before our chat, I'm like, how many cruises have I been on? Probably 30 plus.
Wow.
It's been a lot. It's been a lot and a lot of fun. And it all started when I was in graduate school. That's when it really took off. But my very, very, very first cruise was actually in undergrad. And that struck a bug for me, hit a chord for a few years. But definitely as an undergrad, wasn't going to really look into it until I got a little bit older and found in graduate school, when the budget is tight, hence the title of our interview today, what can you do for vacation? So the challenge for me is that a lot of graduate students or a lot of people with tighter budgets might hear, low-cost vacation options like camping or backpacking and hostels, and I don't know about you, Anne, but that's not my speed. I'm not interested. I'm really interested in getting some great value for money, and definitely not really into roughing it. So had to find some alternative options and circled back around to cruising. And the great thing about cruising, and well, there's many amazing things, but the first great thing is that it's really great if you're on a budget, because you can prepay for everything. So there's lots of other options, like some people finance their cruises. I'm not really into that. But in terms of having a budget, you can book in advance, sometimes up to 2 years in advance. And then at that moment when you booked how much your cruise will cost. You can prepay for your gratuities, you can prepay for your drinks, you can prepay for your shore excursions, which are the trips you take when you're in port. And all in all, it can really be affordable and fun, because once you're there, all the cares are away, the credit card is gone, you've got definitely some opportunities for some additional spending if you have the budget. But if not, you don't have to spend another penny from the time you get on board to the time you get off.
So for those who have not cruised, let's talk about what's included on a cruise, right? Because you have your room,
yes,
right?
Yes.
You don't have to worry about any transportation, which is one of those weird, costs that can sneak up on you when you're traveling.
For sure.
I have a story where I was vacationing in Europe, and I thought, oh, well, we'll drive. It'll be a lot cheaper. We'll rent a car and we'll drive instead of taking planes. Well, I didn't take into account tolls.
Oh.
And we drove from Paris down to Milan in Italy, and it was a ton in tolls, like just a ton. And I mean, I was in a situation where I was in undergrad on a very, very tight budget, and that blew my budget out of the water. You don't even think about those kind of travel expenses. So you've got the transportation, you got all the food.
Yes.
So that's the best part for me, because if I want to order steak, if I want to order dessert, if I want to order an appetizer, bring it on.
For sure. And the industry is changing slightly. So there are some modifications cruise lines are making to try to upsell you once you're on board. But definitely in every case, every cruise is going to include accommodations. It's going to include transportation from port to port, and it's going to include meals. And then one thing that people typically forget is entertainment. So if you're going to go and see a comedian, that usually costs money, and you might have to pay for a drink. On cruise ships, you don't have to worry about that. Or go to a dance club or different activities. They have sail away parties and conga lines and all sorts of evening shows. And some are very professional Broadway show caliber, and some are not. There's a lot of variety, but definitely it's a great opportunity to get that all-inclusive package as well as move along. So one of the things over time that I really looked into is pre-purchasing drinks. If you're into a little alcoholic beverage, you can do that. So most cruise lines have packages for all-you-can-drink packages, or sometimes it's wine, sometimes it's alcohol.
Well, one of my favorites that I found out on my most recent cruise, and I don't know where I've been my whole life, but sometimes you just find these things out later. The room service is included.
And room service.
What? Like, I've always been, I've on rare occasion will treat myself to room service, right? That's just one of those, like, I just can't quite stomach the cost. But to have that
Yeah.
included at no additional charge, holy moly, bring me all the things.
Yes, yes, yes. I find that cruising is like a fabulous luxury. There are one of the big perks for my husband and I is that we've committed fairly early on in our cruising days to a single cruise line. And so now we're at the platinum level with them, which gives all sorts of additional bonuses with no additional cost. So we get to, cut lines and check in on the boat sooner. We get invited to past guest parties. We get, yeah, which is fun. We get a little gift every time we go cruising. So we've got a ton of cruise line mugs in our house and notebooks and other little things that we've collected along the way. And it's just a lot of fun to go from island to island. Since this is creatively rich, some of the things that we do on each island to save some money. So you can obviously book a shore excursion, which we've had amazing experiences with cruise line based shore excursions. But if we're looking to save some money, or if we're not interested in any of those shore excursions, we'll simply walk around the island on foot. Typically, most places that cruise lines go are safe for tourists to walk around. We like to ask the crew, because they're there typically every week, if not every other week, of like, where are we going? Should we go up by ourselves? Do we really need to buy a shore excursion? What shore excursions are good? What shore excursions are bad? And not typically the shore excursion crew. We ask the other crew members, because shore excursion crew members are there to sell you shore excursions. So everything's awesome. But when you ask the other crew members, and sometimes other guests on board, you'll get really good tips on little things like that. Sometimes on other ports, in particular, it used to be like this in Key West. I'm not sure if it still is, but you could purchase a shore excursion through the cruise line, or you could go to that company's website and purchase it directly through them and actually take the same shore excursion with everyone on the boat, and it's a bit cheaper. So those are some cool shore excursion tips. We've rented bicycles and gone around. Typically don't rent I typically don't rent the scooters or the buggies or the motorcycles. A few years ago, my husband fell on one of those, so we're kind of done with those.
You're broken up. No more.
Yeah, it's like we're no more motorcycles. That was on a cruise without me before we got together. But I'm like, you did what? And you fell what? No, I'm done. There's really lots of fun things to do on board as well as off board. The last few cruises with my mom, we went to a place called Freeport, Bahamas. And Freeport is a fun place, but there's not much to do right outside of the port. Typically, you'll need to take a taxi to get into town. And my mom, she looked over the edge. We were in port, and she's like, I don't want to get off. So we spent all day on board, and that was super fun, too. We played bingo, we did trivia, and it's so relaxing to do like the pools, the saunas if they're available, other experiences when everyone else is off the boat. It's like you're definitely feeling a bit more luxurious in the midst of this massive ship, mostly by yourself. So that's another fun thing.
I found that when I've done that in the past, where I've stayed on board when everybody else is gone, the pools are pretty much, you have them to yourself.
For sure.
Which, as much fun as it is to get like in a bathing suit in front of strangers, I'd much rather just not. So
sometimes you can find really sweet deals on the cruises themselves. So every cruise line will offer multiple categories. Those are different types of rooms, and they are usually at different price points. Sometimes it depends on how far in advance you book or how close to sailing you book. Sometimes it can be based on your past guest or past cruiser activity. If you like to gamble, I'm not a huge gambling fan, but every cruise line has a casino on board. And so if you like to gamble, I've been aware that they can give pretty awesome perks, including free cruises to people to get you back on board and to get you back in the casino. But some of the things that my husband and I do, so to maybe save some dollars if you're interested. One is we look for porthole rooms. So these are typically on the bottom of the ship, in the front, and sometimes you can get a porthole room for the same price as an inside, but it has a porthole window. They're typically a little bit bigger because they're in the front of the ship, and just the shapes work out so they're a bit bigger. But so that can give you a feel of an ocean view, which is a room with a window without actually, paying for a full ocean view. Another, my husband and I are looking at a cruise for April, and we had some options in terms of staying interior as well as looking at maybe an obstructed view. If you're interested in daylight, I personally love interior cabins because it's sleeping time all the time.
Oh, how funny. I'm the opposite. Give me the sunshine. I'm here. I'm on a cruise to get the sunshine.
But if you ever want to go to sleep, you just turn off the lights and it's automatic nighttime. So I love that about interior cabins. But if you need some sunshine, my sister, for example, always wanted to know what time of day it was based on a window. So if you want a window, you can look at maybe a porthole room, or sometimes they have obstructed view, ocean views and balconies, which can save you a little bit of money. One thing you might want to look at are your credit cards. So sometimes, like I'm an American Express card holder, they have an American Express travel website, so you might want to check there. I know when we were going on our honeymoon, we got a pretty sweet deal through American Express, which was kind of cool. I have never booked through like Expedia or any kind of travel agency. I typically book my cruises myself. I like to be able to, except for that one with American Express, I like to be able to connect directly with the cruise line in case there's any problems. But I've heard that some people get really great deals through their travel agents as well.
Cool. So you made the decision early on to commit to one cruise line.
Yes.
And so how did you come to the decision of the one you chose, and what was it?
Yeah. So I'm an engineer by trade. I should mention that. It's probably why I'm so interested in helping people streamline and automate their business systems. And my lovely husband is also an engineer. So we sat down and looked at all of the cruise line loyalty programs and did a bit of an analysis. We put on our engineers' hats and we compared them based on sort of what we would need to do in terms of number of days on the sea and other interactions that were required to achieve certain levels of status and what those levels of status brought to us. And so at that time, things have shifted since then, but at that time, one cruise line was, heads and shoulders above all the rest. And so we committed, and now we're platinum, as I mentioned, so I can't complain. And that's only one below the next level, which is a ways away for us, but I'm sure we'll get there eventually. And it's a lot of fun.
Now you had to play the system a little bit to get that platinum, right?
We did. So as I mentioned, things have changed, and I think the cruise line quickly realized, oh my goodness, we're giving out a lot of value. And perhaps they noticed that quite a few people were kind of climbing their ranks quickly. So my husband and I got an email. I'll never forget. We both were in a state of panic because they were switching from number of cruises to achieve, like that was their metric to achieve, to go up in status was the number of cruises that you were on, as opposed to days in a cruise, which can be completely different, because that means a 3-day cruise is the same as a 7-day cruise, is the same as a 21-day cruise. And so, as I mentioned, we started this process in graduate school where 3-day cruises and 4-day cruises were really our kind of bread and butter, both financially and being able to get away from school. So they were switching and transitioning from the per cruise counting system to the per day counting system, and we were not going to make it. So they had a little bit of a grandfathering period, and what we did is we booked several cruises back to back so that we crossed the threshold before the deadline hit. And now we're well past the day deadline for that particular cruise line, but back then there was a little bit of panic, but we found our way around it.
But good on you for knowing the rules and playing by them to your advantage, right?
Exactly.
That's what it's all about. And I've heard of people like actually retiring 2 cruise lines, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Every time I've gone on a cruise, it seems I run into somebody who said, you know what? At-home care is too expensive. I've got meals. I've got a roof over my head. I've got these wonderful people to take care of me and make my bed and change my light bulbs and do all this stuff, and not a care in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, I've met many cruisers, especially I think as the baby boomers get a bit older, that sell their homes when they want to retire, collect all of that money, and instead of putting it into rent or into another home, they are on the sea and book cruise after cruise after cruise. One other big tip that that reminds me of is when you're on board, they're typically booking incentives. So if you book your next cruise when you're on board your existing cruise, you typically can get some extra onboard credit. You also may be able to extend the same deal to people in your family or people that you want to travel with. So going on board with in the back of your mind, knowing the next time you want to sail can really help you. So these individuals, they had retired, sold their house, and they were on a cruise and then booking the next one, or they were booking like a month in advance. And then they'd spend the holidays with family and back out they went, and they were so happy and seeing the world, like there are cruise lines all over. China is really a big place for cruising. I haven't been there yet. Most of our cruising has been in North America and Europe, but there's lots in Australia and New Zealand. Like you can see the entire world cruising. One really cool cruise that we did that was just an unbelievable deal was a transatlantic. So sometimes a repositioning cruise where the cruise ship starts in one place and ends in a different place, you can get some amazing deals. So we ended up getting a 14-day cruise from San Juan, Puerto Rico to Barcelona, Spain. And I think it was a few years ago, but I think it might have been $500 each, like something.
Wow.
My husband and I have done many a cruise during hurricane season. We got married in August, which is kind of in that hurricane season region. That we didn't plan the wedding for the cruising, but for anniversaries and things, we tend to be cruising and we tend to hit a lot of hurricanes. Even on our honeymoon cruise, we hit a hurricane. So if you're want a good deal, you might want to look during hurricane season, but you definitely cannot be committed to the destination. We've gotten on quite a few ships that they like, you're going to the Bahamas? Nope, you're going to Mexico. Or you think you're going to, one place and you're going to the next because the ship is avoiding the storm. So good place to get a deal, but definitely not if you're committed to a particular location at a particular time.
So how does that work? I mean, do you buy the travel insurance then to make sure that you're safe from hurricanes, or do you just trust that it'll be okay and you're going to go somewhere and that's all that matters?
Yeah, we just trust that it'll be okay and we're going to go somewhere. Okay. That's all that matters. I'm trying to think. We've never purchased a travel insurance. Sometimes what we do is we buy our airfare from the cruise line. Okay. And the benefit of that is if the cruise line changes the dates, or if your flight is canceled and they've booked your cruise for you, it's kind of like insurance. Like they'll fly you to the next port of call, and they'll make sure you make the boat. Where
that's interesting.
If you buy your own travel, then you're on your own. You're supposed to show up when the boat's getting ready to go, etc.
Yeah, that's awesome. I would never have even thought that cruising was an option when I was in school. That would have seemed totally out of like, oh, well, that's what rich people do. So
it's interesting. And there are definitely different levels of cruise lines. So some of them we've never touched, but when you think about it, you can go on a 3-4 day cruise for, $250 if you get it, at the right time, which is well within, your means. And or at least it was well within our means. And if you're driving distance to a port, that eliminates the airfare, which makes it really accessible. I'll never forget one day we were sailing, I think, out of Port Canaveral in Orlando, and our cab driver, because that's an expensive port to go out of, Port Canaveral, because you typically, especially if you're flying, because you'll fly into Orlando, but then it's like a 60-mile drive or something, or 50-minute drive, and that's a very expensive cab ride. So, or shuttle or et cetera. If you're really tight on your budget, you might not want to do Port Canaveral. But our cab driver, we were just chatting along the way to the port, and he said, "You know what? I live here, so what I'll do is I'll call a cruise line up the day of sailing at like 10 in the morning or 8 in the morning and say, do you have any rooms left on fill in the blank boat that he knows is leaving?" And cruise lines always want to leave full. So he claimed, I've never verified this, I don't live near a cruise port, but he claimed that he got on some ship for virtually nothing because it was, let him on with the potential of him buying alcohol or buying gifts or, buying shore excursions or letting the room go empty. And so apparently he negotiates some pretty good deals. Again, I've never done this myself, but according to him, if you live in Florida or South Carolina or, now ships are sailing out of New York and Baltimore. So Galveston, New Orleans. There's lots of options, and definitely Seattle, LA. So any of those places, if you live close enough, you might want to call them up on day of sailing and see what you can work out.
That is so great. I would never in a million years have thought, like, what you got? I mean, but people do that with hotel rooms all the time, right? I mean, that's a pretty common hotel tactic. If you're not sure if you need it, or you're just willing to play it by ear a little bit, those local hotels will cut you deals sometimes. So
yeah, and you can do that with cruise lines apparently as well. So at least through the grapevine. So it's a lot. I love cruising. There's something about being on the water, moving from port to port, is really, really amazing. If you're ever interested in going to Bermuda, I really recommend cruising as like the only way to go to Bermuda, because Bermuda is not an inexpensive island. So sometimes people think of the Caribbean and of islands like, oh, there are poor people. That's not true for every island.
It's certainly not true for Bermuda.
Not true for Bermuda, not true for the Cayman Islands. Like some of the islands, in the ocean are doing quite well and have, really high expected income for their population. And Bermuda is one of those places. And the cool thing about Bermuda, when you cruise there, is that the ship will leave typically someplace on the east coast of the U.S. And it'll take a day, maybe a day and a half to get, or maybe 2 days to get to Bermuda, and then it will just stay there. Yeah. So it's literally a floating hotel. So compared to
with all your food for free,
with all your food that's included, right? So and last time I checked, at least, I don't think Bermuda has any all-inclusive resorts. So really the only way that I'm aware of to get that all-inclusive experience in Bermuda is on a cruise ship. And now those trips from Bermuda to mainland U.S. Are probably some of the choppiest water that I've ever been on, even in these massive ships. But as long as you're okay with a little bit of movement on the way there and back, I find that Bermuda is a beautiful place and very convenient to have a ship with 24 hours on and off privileges. It's truly a floating hotel for those 3 or 4 days that you're in Bermuda.
That's wonderful. And I think those little dots work really well, and bring your own Dramamine for sure.
Yes.
On those cruises. Cause I remember paying like $7 for one dose of Dramamine on the cruise ship. But you know what? It was worth the $7 at the time. So sometimes you just need it. Sometimes you need it.
So
bring your own. You can probably get it for less than $7 a dose.
For sure. Oh, that's so funny. I fortunately don't have that problem, the seasickness problem. But I've definitely seen many a person with a spot behind their ear and taking things to deal. It's in my opinion well worth it. Oh my goodness, I can't get enough of cruising. So
yeah. Well, Ada, thank you so much for being on the show today. I learned a lot about cruising and how that can actually be a cost-effective vacation, which is not something that I think most people think about.
Yes. The last tip I'll leave everyone with is look at dollars per day. So what my husband and I do is we'll pick a cruise. We'll act as if we're purchasing the whole thing so we can see the bottom line. Right. Because cruise fare plus taxes plus port charges. So the more ports you go to, the port charges can add up. And then we'll divide that by the number of days of the cruise. And that's what we'll use to compare to figure out what the best fit is for us.
Awesome. Because it does, the price that you're quoted at the beginning is nowhere near the price you're quoted at the end. So that's a really good point when you're looking, because you can't rely on that top number to feel like, oh, well, this is how much it's going to cost, because it's not true.
It's not true. And then, if you want to add on prepaid gratuities and other add-ons like alcohol or specialty dining or lots of things you could add on. But so try to get that bottom line so you can compare the bottom line. So you can have the freedom of being on board and knowing that it's all been paid for and you don't have to worry about it. You can have fun.
Because there's no luxury like paid for.
That's right. And it's so much more fun that way.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Okay, well, now I need to go book a cruise.
Yay!